I'm ready.
Questions you'd like to ask?
Are there any plans to have the Imagine Detroit?
He said, yeah.
Are there any plans to have an Imagine Detroit?
We have held discussions with the fine folks from Bedrock Realty, which is connected from Dan Gilbert's business operations. And under the right circumstances and with the right synergies, we absolutely would consider opening a venue in the city of Detroit.
Hi, my name's Linda Bruce. I live in Novi. I've been to Novi Imagine Theater many, many times.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. I'm a movie film kind of freak. And I just wanted to pass something on to you. I once had a gift certificate that expired to your theater. And I went to the theater and I explained it's expired. I couldn't get here before it actually expired. Silly me. And the concierge took very good care of me, reissued the gift certificate to me. And I just have to say, sometimes founders, chairmen, CEOs of companies don't hear that their people are really doing a great job. And I wanted to share that with you.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing that. It's very kind. I am a staunch believer that our job is to operate our businesses consistent with the golden rule. And that is that we have to treat our guests as we would want them to treat ourselves. And you might discern that I refer to our patrons as guests, because literally that's what they are. And I consider them guests in my home. And so I'm always just thrilled to hear that our teammates assimilate that value system and that they're demonstrating it in their work. And honestly, I believe that's how we engender a sense of loyalty with customers. You know, we're selling the same movies that AMC and MJR and United Artists are selling. And so we have to have a point of difference. I think every business has to have a unique value proposition. And I believe that's really the next frontier for us. We've made a lot of strides in terms of enhancing the physical plant elements in our venues, and I'm looking to further our efforts to make the hospitality realm even greater in our businesses. But thank you so much. You're very kind to share that with me. And by the way, if anybody had a bad experience, you can tell me that too. I can take it.
Thank you for coming here tonight and sharing your experiences with us. Over the years, you must have hired hundreds, if not thousands, of people in different roles, different capacities within your organization. Can you share maybe 2 or 3 things that you look for when you do hire people in roles?
I'd be happy to. You know, I think the one, there's a truth in business is that great people make you, and, you know, so-so folks will definitely break you. And so the quality of the folks that we have on our team clearly make a difference. And I'll tell you very candidly, the first and foremost thing that I'm looking for in any hire is to try to discern that someone genuinely cares. Because if someone has a nonchalant attitude, or they're not adherence to the value system that I just espoused, then I think that's a recipe for disaster. And so I have to discern that the folks that we're talking about bringing out our team will in fact treat our guests graciously, will take responsibility, and I'm a strong believer in hire for attitude and train for skills. And so there's really nothing that's done in our business today that one can't learn by training. But what I can't train someone for is their innate personality, whether they're kind and considerate, and whether they genuinely care about the guest experience. And so in my book, that's the most important component.
Hi, my name is Mama Richard, and I have a question for you. It seemed that, well, first of all, thank you for being so honest and approaching, sharing your experience with us with such candor. Really appreciate it. Can you talk to us a little bit about the role that your spouse played in helping you navigate the ups and downs, the experiences that you shared?
Mary, would you like to answer
What's everybody say?
that? We really have to stop here now.
At the beginning, when Paul was looking at the theater business, we used to discuss the business, the finances of it, the marketing, the target market, different aspects of it. As Paul mentioned, we both have a background in business from Wayne State. So there were a lot of things that we would discuss and analyze and question, and it was up to Paul, of course, to find the answers to those. And we spent a lot of time together at the beginning talking about this before Paul invested in cinema, in the Clarkston Cinema in Clarkston. That was a single screen movie theater. Then when Paul was going to expand into Cinema Hollywood in Birch Run, we again discussed it at length. In Novi, there was a big discussion. By the time he got to Canton, I just said, go ahead, honey. I knew he was asking the right questions. I knew he was thinking about the right kind of things. I could see how he was growing as an entrepreneur and the manager of that type of business. I had a lot of confidence in him. Today, my role is, honey, what time do you want me to be there and where should I be? And that's about it. I have complete confidence in my husband. But thank you for asking that.
I'd like to just add comment to the thought that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm really a weenie. I'm not an entrepreneur. And I'll tell you why I don't think I'm an entrepreneur. Because I've never had the guts to give up the day job. Virtually every entrepreneur takes that plunge. And perhaps because of my training as an accountant, I've always wanted to hedge my bets. Now, in candor, what I didn't tell you was, why did we build Cinema Hollywood to begin with? Why did we, was it just on a lark? No, it was because I was fearful that my day job was going away. We were facing really difficult times at Procter Financial in the mid-90s. And I was concerned as the chief financial officer we were going to crash land that business. And so I saw Cinema Hollywood candidly as Plan B. And so Plan B has become, I guess, a real thing at this point. But if you would ask me in the mid-90s, what are the chances that the movie business could turn out to be successful and you would still be with Procter Financial, I would have given you 0 odds of that. And yet, I'm very fortunate that the teams, both those teams respectively, found a way to become successful.
Well, Paul, first of all, I'd like to thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure to have you here, and your experience and your interview with Aubrey was really helpful for at least for me personally. I thought it was a really unique experience. But to kind of piggyback on what you just talked about, how do you juggle having 2 positions that are both extremely daunting in themselves? And how do you, because we kind of relate to that, and we're kind of facing some of those challenges ourselves. So what are some of the things that you do to help you maximize your bandwidth and really juggle a dual career?
You're doing it already, Max. And that is, you're surrounded with 2 partners that are highly skilled and can pick up the slack and so forth. And that's really, if I was not surrounded by really terrific people who essentially make me look good at Procter Financial and at the theaters, then it would have collapsed a long time ago. I would have chosen sides, so to speak. And so the key, of course, is just simply to work hard. It's to demonstrate your value proposition every day and to be able to find a way to work with your partners as you're trying to maintain the bandwidth and still eat while you're young and starting up your business.
thank you both for coming and sharing. That's very important for startups. I'd like to have you talk about, as you went through this, specifically, how did you decide how much equity you were going to give to your lenders, and what was the process you went through in trying to work that through? In other words, how much of the business did you have to give up to get out of your balance?
You know, we never had to renegotiate a loan that required us to share equity, but we certainly have shared equity with our capital providers, those who provided true equity. And I wish I could tell you that it's fully scientific. The reality is that I always felt it was important that the operators of the business would control 51%, because I was always fearful that we would have renegade investors who would essentially come in and say, gee, we think you really ought to have Pop Weaver popcorn, or you really ought to use Orville Redenbacher instead of Pop Weaver, or something along those lines. And so I'm very fortunate that the investor base that we enjoy today is very supportive, yet very low maintenance. I would tell you this, and I've actually been admonished that we've been too generous with our investors. We essentially, the capital structure is that we provide our investors with a 12% cumulative preferred return plus 49% equity. And so it's, I'd say it's a reasonably rich deal for the investors. And you might say, well, that seems too generous. And if you go back to 2002, interest rates were higher and so forth. In 2000, we were raising the first real slug of money. In Berkshire, it was actually 15% plus 15% plus. Although Jim and Dale only had a third of that business. But I had, later on, as interest rates declined, I had folks say to me, why don't you reduce the preferred return? Because the market doesn't demand that these days. And I explained to folks that my goal as the leader of Imagine is to align my interests with those of my investors. And that's actually one of the things I'm most proud of Imagine. And when I tell you that, the capital that earns that return only is entitled to that return until such time as it's repaid. And so it's solely within my discretion as to how long that equity is outstanding. And I'm very proud to tell you that both at Cinema Hollywood, actually with every theater except the most recent one, Royal Oak, every dollar of investment that was made through those businesses has been paid to the investors, and they've achieved all their returns. They still have their equity hit. Oh, and by the way, they still get checks at the end every year too. So I got happy investors, and so again, going back to the fact that it wasn't very scientific, I have enormous respect for capital. And that capital, that's born out of the fact that I don't come from a money background. And without that equity capital, literally, we would have nothing. And so I've always felt like that was such an important component to our ability to actually grow and succeed that I wanted to make sure it was well compensated, and that it was compensated perhaps even more than folks would deem appropriate. Because again, without it, I'm absolutely nowhere.
Just a quick follow-up. Will you take my name and address and telephone number when you start to do and give me a call?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Great question. One more question.